Hey guys, it's Monica at Academic Phoenix Plus, and we are almost done rigging this character. It's been a little bit of a journey, but hopefully you guys are learning a lot, and this will encourage you to continue to rig your characters and continue learning how to rig because it's awesome. The world constraint. So I need to scale the rig like this, but the world control is actually in that group, so that's not going to work. So let's go ahead and Shift P, which is unparents the Calico group control. And I'm going to actually middle mouse and drag it into the Calico all. So it's still in the same group. It's just that now the controls are on themselves. I got the do not touch, and then you've got the rig control. So now what I can do is select the world control, select the rig group, and then I can go to constraint scale. So with that, now I'll be able to scale my character with no issues. I can rotate her, I can translate her, and do whatever we want with her, and there's no issues. So that's perfect. So now we have scale. All right. Yay, she's moving, she's doing great. So next is the part where most people start to, if you didn't like rigging before, you're gonna hate rigging now. It's painting weights. So we have a couple of issues when it comes to our rig. So for example, if I raise my arm here, you're gonna notice that her arm's being pulled, right? Or this part's being pulled and it doesn't look good. In some areas, it's okay. You can see that some areas start to kind of crush, but we really can't have anything like this because this is gonna cause problems. It's just not gonna look realistic. And, you know, we've got also like her face is starting to melt, which is really creepy. So there's a couple of things we need to do to kind of fix that. So there's two ways we can fix this. It's the component editor, and it's also painting weights, which kind of they basically do the same thing. So we'll do the easy one first. In my opinion, it's easier. It's the component editor. So if I lift this arm up, you can see that it's being pulled. And what's happening is that this area is being pulled by the shoulder or maybe even the elbow, but really it should be pulling by the spine. So what I need to do is select the vertices that are being affected around this area. And what I can do is go to Windows, General Editors, Component Editor, and this window pops up that has a couple of tabs. The one I'm looking for is smooth skin because that's what we did earlier, was actually bind the skin. And it's a chart, it's a graph, it's an Excel sheet, and it tells you the vertex. So you can see that there's thousands of vertices in this model, which is true. And it also shows you what they're being influenced. So for example, the vertices that I have selected are being influenced by the shoulder, spine 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, and 6. And I actually want to keep the spine, but I don't want it to be influencing by the shoulder. So the fastest way I can get rid of it is by selecting this, clicking and dragging all the way down to the bottom, and then just typing in 0. That's going to replace everything with 0 influence, and then you'll notice that it's actually it stopped. So now it's not being influenced at all by that, which is exactly what I want. You can notice that the face has a similar issue. So that's the component editor is actually very helpful. So I can kind of mess around with this. The spine's usually okay. It's usually the arms that have a problem. And I can move this around. And let's talk about painting weights next. So painting weights basically means it's a black and white information of how the joints are influencing the skin. So if I right click and go to paint weights, you're going to see that she suddenly gets black. And what that means is that there is no influence on the spine 5. If I go to 6, there's some influence. The shoulder's having some influence. The neck has a lot of influence. The head has some influence. The jaw has some influence. At the top of the head has some influence. So the question is, what should the neck or what should the head follow? Should it follow the neck? Should it follow the head? What should it follow? Well, actually, it should be pretty simple. It should be 100% influenced by the head. When I move the head joint, the head should move for sure. And yes, maybe the neck will have a little bit of influence, but I can also move the head. So I'm just going to go ahead and select the neck. And I've got a value of 1 over here at the bottom. And I also have something called replace. So it's going to replace whatever value I have in here with a value of 1, and I'm going to flood. Now, this face is actually separated from this body. If it was connected, I would grab the vertices and then flood. So if I deselect now, oh, fatal error. All right, I will be right back. Okay, she's back. That was weird. All right, let's hope that doesn't happen again. Let's see, where was I? Okay. Shift right click paint weights, grabbing the head, replace value of 1, flood. Let go. Okay, so far so good. And now when I rotate the head, you'll notice that everything actually looks good. She actually isn't warping really weird. She looks creepy like a zombie, but so far this actually looks really good. So that is 100% influence. So it's very similar to the component editor, where I'm literally saying, hey, you can have 100% of the influence here, but there's some areas, but do you notice how her chest is moving too when I do this? We don't want that. So I got to fix that. But when you get the neck, you also get a twist as well. So we're getting both worlds. Now let's focus on the chest. So let's grab the weights. This one's going to be easy because, and again, double check to make sure that I don't select anything that I shouldn't. I'm going to go to Windows, General Editor, Component Editor. Again, we're going to scroll over here to Smooth Skin. And let's see what it's being influenced. So it's okay if it's being influenced by maybe not the shoulders, but the shoulders and all that. Really what I don't want is the jaw or the head. So I'm going to select these 2 rows, go all the way down to the bottom and hit 0. And now if I select this, I should be able to rotate this and the chest doesn't get impacted. Now I do see a little bit of influence. I didn't select enough up here at the top. So maybe what I should do is grab these. And again, let's see if I still have this here open. Yay. All right. Again, I don't want any influence. So no head, no jaw, no neck, all the way down to the bottom, 0. Now, sometimes there's a vertex and it's just like, I don't know where to go. Like, I just have to give it influence. So sometimes you are going to get an experience like that. And then you really do need to paint weights. But let's see what else we have here. So I got this. Okay, so notice that the last time when it shut down, I'm just going to go ahead and grab all this. Windows, Component Editor, and I don't want any shoulders. Wow. And it also has left shoulders, so we don't want any of that. So let's go ahead and 0 that out. Okay, good. Cool. So let's take a look at this area right here in the center. Notice that when I lift it up and down, and let me save as, it's got a little bit of movement around here. Maybe I do want a little bit, but not that much. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm all about controlling my vertices. So go ahead and select your vertices, shift right click, paint skin. And this one's going to be a little bit more complicated because there's a lot more joints affecting this geometry. It's got spines, it's got fingers, it's got all sorts of stuff. But let's go ahead and see what we have. So right now at this particular area, if I scroll down, it should be influencing by the spine 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yep, 6. So that makes a lot of sense. But let's take a look what happens when we get to the shoulder. The shoulder is probably a little bit too much here. So let's reduce the scale of this brush because it's ginormous. So I can hold down B and then middle mouse. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Didn't work. Let me go back to the brush. Again, right click, paint skin weights. And I'm going to have to go the long way, which is the radius. I can reduce it to 0.5. It's still too big. 0.2. That's better. And what I can do is actually replace it with maybe not so much influence. Maybe I just want 0.3. Whoops, not opacity. Make sure you grab value. And you can just kind of go in and just kind of smooth that out a little bit. So notice that it's how it's impacting it. If I keep scrolling up to joints, let's say the spine itself, I can actually add more influence by increasing the value to 1, and I can get even more influence around this area if that's what I choose. So it's kind of like literally painting weights. You're literally telling Maya, hey, I want this joint to affect this vertice at this %, which is kind of crazy to think about it, but it's pretty cool if you really think about it. And let's see what else. Okay, let's go to the hands. So the hands are probably going to be a little, let's see how they go. Pinky. I am shocked. I guess the fingers were separated enough. Wow, I'm shocked. Ring. Okay, there's a little pull there. You see that pull? What I could do is paint this out, but I could also use the component editor. But I'm going to paint it out just so I can give you guys a view of what that's going to look like. So again, select your vertices because otherwise you're going to paint random areas. You might actually be painting influence on the leg that it's supposed to only affect the fingers. So those type of things you got to be careful. So I've got my vertices selected, shift right click, paint weights. And I know this is my hands and this should be my middle finger. So the middle finger is looking really good, right? But the issue is that when I click on the, let's see, where are we? The ring finger, you'll notice that there's a little bit of white from the ring finger on the middle finger, and I don't want that. With the component editor, I can just say 0. But in this case, I'm going to show you what it looks like. I can replace it with 0 and then paint it out. By doing this, I'm actually literally painting, which is kind of cool, the influence. So instead of using the component editor, I can actually say, no, I literally want 0 influence on here. I can go down and make sure that all of it's removed. You can visually see the finger actually going back to normal and just kind of going through and removing it. Now, another way you can do this is selecting it. This is a value of 0 and you just flood, which means that anything with the vertices selected, it's going to flood with 0. So that's a little bit more exact. Flood. And I didn't select a couple of vertices, so let me grab that one, and I think maybe these guys too. So again, shift right click, paint skin weights, grab this. I'm a value, replace 0 with a value of 0, flood. There you go. Flood, flood, flood. All right. Now what happens if I really want to make sure that this finger controls it, right? So let's go ahead and right click. Let's grab these vertices. Now be careful. You don't want to grab anything over here. You might want to press W to see if you are averaging out at the center of the finger, which I am. And maybe I'll grab some of these. Okay, we'll see how that goes. Okay, right click, paint weights. This time, I just want to make sure it's not being influenced by anything else. So I can look at the pinky. And again, I could just flood to make sure the pinky's not affecting it, which actually it is a little bit. Flood, flood, flood. And then I can grab the ring finger and even add influence to it. Oops, that's pinky. Let's scroll up and go to ring. There you go. So I can add some. So I can add a little bit of influence. So here's add. I'm going to add just a tiny bit of influence. And I can say, actually, I really want this to have a little bit more influence in the joint 1, as well as the joint 2, and a little bit more on the 3, and then finally the 4. Now this is still kind of big for such a small space, so maybe I'll just go to 0.1. But hopefully that will help with the bending. So I just want to make sure that these things are selected well. I can paint it in there and looking good. One last thing I'd like to do is just flood with smooth. If I select smooth on flood, it kind of does a nice little gradient for me. It evens things out a little bit. Cool. Now if we're lucky, we'll be able to do this on one side and not on the other. So hopefully that'll work out. So the thumb, it's looking okay. It's got a big pull right there. So I'm going to use the component editor for this one, just because I know I don't want any influence on the thumb. So Windows, General Editors, Component Editor, And then what I'm looking for is thumbs. I really don't want it to be affected by the thumb. So I'm going to go ahead and go down, 0, take a look, looks okay, moving on. Point. So notice there's a pull right there. So same story, grab some vertices. We can kind of scroll down here, and again, we want to replace it with a value of 0. So we want to make sure that flood, it doesn't have any influence by the ring finger. And we don't want any influence by the, we definitely want influence in the middle finger. We got the point, there you go. We don't want any influence it on the point finger. The middle finger should be by itself. And then this part looks good. So hopefully you get the idea on how to do that. Let me check something really fast. So can you see how the arm's moving just a little bit? It's kind of strange. Let's go ahead and grab some vertices here. And I'm going to take a look at the component editor. And I'm just wondering why it's being pulled that way. Oops. There we go. Elbow, hand, pinky. Okay, so this is actually being affected by the pinky, which really shouldn't be. So I'm just going to take all of this and just say 0. Shouldn't be affected by the thumbs either. So I'm going to go ahead and say thumb 0. Let's see, spine. I feel like, do I have something selected here that affects the spine? Making sure I don't select anything, but this shouldn't be affected by any of the spines. Whoops, what just happened? Let me tear that off. And then just grabbed all the spines and then 0 out. Because I shouldn't move the spine and maybe a little bit of the shoulder, but I shouldn't move the spine and it shouldn't affect the body. Okay, areas that may cause you problems usually are the knees and the skirt. So we're gonna have to play around a little bit with that to make it look a little bit more realistic. That looks really creepy. So let's go ahead and try to figure this thing out. Let's just even her out a little bit here. Yikes. All right, so legs can be a little bit challenging. So let's grab some vertices. I'm gonna grab a chunk. Probably the whole thing here. I'm not convinced about the skirt, so I might worry about the skirt later. Let's just worry about her legs. Okay. Might want to give her shorts or something. Shift right click. Oh, sorry, just right click paint weights. Okay. So for this one's going to be a little bit more challenging because they have to be affected by the knee, the hip, and all sorts of stuff. So let's take a look at the left. So you can see that this is being impacted dramatically by the thigh, then the knee, and then the ankle, but then the ball and the toe, so on and so forth. So we have to figure out, do we need to add or replace to kind of get this to bend a little bit better? So if we add, notice that I have my hip joint and I want to add some influence and it starts to collapse, right? So that's not the right way. And if I grab add and start adding it to the thighs, you'll notice that it's actually helping fill that area up a little bit more. So that's probably what I want, is to actually have a little bit of that hip affecting that particular area. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of paint a little bit of extra influence on that. So then comes the knee. And same thing, I'm going to add a little bit of influence and see what type of effect it has. And notice that once I start painting on the knee, it starts to rise a little bit, which is actually what I want. I actually want this to not collapse so much and to be influenced more by the knee. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of influence around the knee so it doesn't collapse. See what happens. Maybe a little bit here. We'll see. And then of course I like to flood and smooth. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this one, smooth flood, just to see if that did anything, maybe a little bit less. So it's looking a little bit better, still looks collapsed. So let's go back to the hip and let's see if I can add a little bit more of influence. Where am I? Oops, add. Let's see if I can get them to squeeze together just a little bit. Go over here. Just want to rise that up just a little bit. Get those little vertices so they can kind of touch a little bit. So this is going to be meticulous. This is going to take some time and you're going to have to be patient. I recommend that you relax, drink some tea, whatever. It's kind of like UV mapping. You just want to kind of take it easy when you work on this because it can be meticulous and it can drive people crazy. So just kind of relax, enjoy the process. This is going to make your stuff look awesome. If it's not painted well, if it's not painted correctly, kind of like UVs, if you don't have good UVs, you're not going to be able to get good models. But if you have good UVs, that means you're going to have good textures, which means your model is going to look great. So same thing with this one. You can have a rig, but if you have screwed up painted weights, your character, if you animate it, it's going to look nuts. So you want to make sure you take the time. All right, ankle. Let's see what's going on here. So the ankle, I remember, had a couple of issues when I did my foot roll. So that one's okay. But when I roll, I really wanted to roll a little bit more. And specifically, yeah, let's bring this up a little bit. So I want to make sure that this foot is being influenced. So, oh, good. We kept that. Paint weights. Cool. So this is the ankle. Again, I'd like to test it out a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of weight. Does this need to go up a little higher? This is the ankle. So maybe I'll just add a little bit more. So it's visual. The wider it is, the more influence it has. So that means that the percentage of the control the joint has on the vertex. So that's all you're really doing. Let's grab the toe. I don't think the toe has that much influence. All part of the game. This is what technical artists do. It has not gone away. Go to the ball here. All right. I usually flood to smooth it out a little bit. Flood, smooth, ankle, flood. Just make it nice and smooth. So let's see what that looks like. So it's definitely looking better. Let's do a foot roll. Back, forward. Let's get a little bit of the pull. Up. Good. And then the toe roll. Looks a little bit better. Good. All right. Her leg is no longer, look at the difference between this side and that side with the little painted weights. Makes a big difference. All right, let's save. All right, skirt. What are we going to do with you, my dear? Okay. Shift right click. Paint weights. We're going to go to the hip. And again, I'm in add, and I want to add a little bit of influence. Now, the question is, what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to make it shorter? Do we want it to make sure that it collapses? Because this doesn't seem to be following the knee very much. So maybe I actually need to add a little bit on the knee. So let's go ahead and add a little bit more influence on the knee so it actually follows the knee a little bit more. All right, I'm going to increase my radius here to 0.2 because it's not, seems, there it goes. Not a fan of what it's doing. Maybe it's more the root. Let's see what we get if we give it more. No, actually, if I flood it, It's just the hip and then maybe the root. I can smooth it. There you go. Something like that. So it's looking a lot better. And let's see. Good. So now her skirt's looking better for sure. Zero this out. And let's zero this one out too. Let's see, anything else that we see is a little weird? I'm sure there will be as we start to animate, but looks like things are good. Whoop. That's interesting. Let's grab this one. Ah, that's not good. We'll see what happens when we mirror it to the other side. All right, so let's save that. Let's grab the skin. What we're going to do next is go to rigging, skin, mirror weight. And I believe it's YZ positive, just mirror. And theoretically, that should have worked. Yep, you see how the leg is not, this side's not being bothered. Let's look at the knee. You see that it has the same effect as the other one. So it actually takes the same information from here and sends it to the other side, which is great. So that means I don't have to fight. And I think that is the basics of this character. She's basically, there's going to be things that you're going to want to fix, but right now she's working really well. Let me double check to make sure this knee's working. What happens if I go this far? Not bad. The skirt's following. Let's go this way. Cool. Yeah, looks like everything's working. All right, everybody. The character is basically done. The next part would be to create blend shapes for our character, which means it would be face expressions. And then if you wanted to add some extra things like controllers for the ponytail or something like that, that would be like an extra thing. But I think in this case, I'm basically consider this rig done, except for the blend shapes. So that's going to be in the next tutorial when we are going to go over just the basics of blend shapes so that we can actually give our character some expressions, and that way she will start looking alive. So thank you very much for watching. It would be wonderful if you guys could go ahead and subscribe to my channel by clicking that little subscribe button and also the bell so that you don't miss any of my tutorials. Also, take a look at academicphoenixplus.com where you can find free tutorials, free ebooks, training videos, free downloads, and so much more. So take a look at academicphoenixplus.com and leave a comment. We'd love to hear what you think about my tutorials and if it's working or if you have any questions. So please leave a comment below. Thanks everybody for watching. Keep creating, and I will see you next time.